Do you want people to clap for you or stand when you walk in? Has being nice ever cost you your peace, your time, or your purpose? Pause and really think about that. Because many of us have built entire personalities around being liked. We smile when we are offended. We agree when we disagree. We show up when we are exhausted. We say yes when our spirit is screaming no. And then we wonder why we feel invisible, overlooked, and drained. Being liked feels good, it feeds the ego, it gives you quick validation. The text messages, the compliments, the invitations, the applause, but authority is different. Authority is quiet. Authority doesn't beg for attention. Authority doesn't chase rooms. Rooms adjust when authority walks in. Here is the dangerous trap. Being liked can become an addiction, approval addiction. You start measuring your decisions by reactions. Will they be happy with me? Will they still support me? Will they misunderstand me? And slowly, without realizing it, you stop asking the only question that truly matters. Is God pleased with this? In John chapter 12, verse 43, the Bible says, "For they loved the praise of men more than the praise of God." Notice that word loved. It wasn't casual, it wasn't accidental. They loved it, they craved it, they preferred it. They chose human applause over divine approval. And that is the tension we are confronting tonight. You cannot simultaneously chase the praise of men and fully obey the call of God. At some point, one will threaten the other. When you decide to stand for truth, someone will feel uncomfortable. When you set boundaries, someone will call you proud. When you say no, someone will call you difficult. And in that moment, you will feel the pull, the temptation to shrink just a little so you can stay light. But let me ask you something deeper. What has being liked cost you already? Did it cost you your standards? Did it cost you your focus? Did it cost you opportunities because you were too busy maintaining an image? Some of you are exhausted not because life is hard, but because you are performing kindness, performing agreement, performing humility, and performance is tiring. Meanwhile, being respected is different. Being respected is not about intimidation. It is not about harshness. It is about value recognition. When you are respected, people understand your standards. They understand your boundaries. They understand your convictions. They may not always agree, but they know you stand for something. Respect is rooted in consistency and clarity. Furthermore, when you chase approval, you dilute purpose. You start editing your calling. You soften your message. You adjust your obedience. You delay difficult decisions. Why? Because you are trying to keep everyone comfortable. But purpose was never designed to keep everyone comfortable. Purpose was designed to fulfill assignment. Think about it carefully. If you are always chosen because you are agreeable, what happens the day you must disagree? If people only celebrate you because you never confront, what happens the day you must correct? If your influence is built on being harmless, what happens when you must be bold? There is a reason why some people clap for you but never truly trust you. They like you, but they don't look to you for direction. They enjoy your company, but they don't value your counsel. Why? Because authority requires firmness. Authority requires integrity. Authority requires the courage to disappoint when necessary. Now hear me clearly. This is not a call to be rude. It is not a call to be arrogant. It is a call to stop being controlled by the fear of losing approval. Because the fear of losing approval is one of the most subtle forms of bondage. It keeps you small. It keeps you quiet. It keeps you agreeable. And sometimes it keeps you average. Imagine what your life would look like if you stopped making decisions based on applause. Imagine the freedom, imagine the clarity, imagine the strength. Imagine waking up and asking, what is right, instead of what is popular. Imagine speaking truth even when your voice shakes. Imagine setting boundaries even when people withdraw. That is where respect begins. Consequently, the real question tonight is not whether you can be liked. You already know how to do that. The real question is whether you are willing to risk being misunderstood in order to be impactful. Because impact requires courage. Impact requires conviction. Impact requires choosing purpose over popularity. When you chase approval, you dilute purpose. You shrink your calling to fit the comfort of others. You trade authority for applause, and applause fades, but purpose endures. So I ask you again, and this time answer honestly in your heart, do you want applause or authority? Do you want to be liked or respected? Jesus was not nice. He was loving, but he was firm. And that difference changes everything. We have created a version of faith that is soft, agreeable, always accommodating. But when you actually study the life of Jesus Christ, you will quickly realize he was not obsessed with being liked. He was obsessed with being obedient. There is a moment in Matthew chapter 21, verse 12 to 13, where Jesus walks into the temple and sees corruption. The Bible says he overturned the tables of the money changers and drove them out. That is not the behavior of someone protecting his popularity. That is the action of someone protecting purpose. He disrupted a system. He offended powerful people. He created tension in a sacred space. Why? Because truth mattered more than applause. Imagine being there that day, the noise, the shock, the anger in the room, people whispering, who does he think he is? Religious leaders already uncomfortable with him, now even more threatened. If Jesus were concerned about maintaining a gentle image, that moment would never have happened. But he understood something many of us have not yet accepted. Sometimes righteousness looks disruptive. Additionally, in John chapter 6, verse 66, the Bible says that many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. Many, not strangers, disciples. People who had walked with him, people who had listened to him. And yet when his teaching became too hard, too confronting, too uncompromising, they left. Now pause there. If your goal is to be liked, that verse should terrify you, because it proves that you can be perfectly aligned with God and still lose people. You can speak truth and still be abandoned. You can refuse to dilute your message and watch the crowd shrink. Jesus did not run after them to soften his words. He did not send a message saying, "I'm sorry if I offended you." He turned to the 12 and asked, "Do you also want to go away?" That is authority. That is confidence in assignment. That is clarity about purpose. Meanwhile, we panic when two people unfollow us. We question our worth when one person misunderstands us. We replay conversations in our heads because someone looked uncomfortable when we expressed a boundary. Do you see the contrast? We are emotionally shaken by minor rejection, but Jesus stood firm in the face of mass departure. This is where the tension rises, because you say you want to be respected. You say you want to walk in authority. You say you want to influence. But are you prepared for the loneliness that sometimes accompanies conviction? Are you prepared for the discomfort of being misunderstood? Are you prepared for the moment when standing for truth costs you invitations? Here is the revelation. Love is not the same as niceness. Niceness avoids discomfort. Love confronts it. Niceness protects feelings at all costs. Love protects destiny, even if feelings are temporarily hurt. Jesus loved deeply, but he never compromised truth to maintain comfort. And if we are called to reflect him, then we must examine ourselves honestly. Have we mistaken passivity for humility? Have we mistaken silence for peace? Have we mistaken people-pleasing for Christ-likeness? Because real strength is calm, not cruel, firm, not harsh, clear, not confusing. When you know who you are and whose you are, you stop negotiating your values for temporary approval. You stop shrinking your standards to keep insecure people comfortable. You stop apologizing for convictions that are rooted in truth. Furthermore, authority flows from identity. Jesus knew he was sent. He knew his assignment. He knew his timing. And when identity is secure, rejection does not destabilize you. It may hurt, but it does not move you. So let me ask you something deeper now. If standing for what is right caused some people to walk away, would you still stand? If protecting your peace offended a few individuals, would you still protect it? If obedience reduced your audience, would you still obey? Because this is the crossroad. This is where being liked and being respected separate. Being liked says adjust so they stay. Being respected says stand so you remain aligned. And tonight you must decide which version of yourself you are building. Let's go deeper. Most people who are nice are not weak. They are afraid. Afraid of rejection. afraid of conflict, afraid of being misunderstood. And fear, when it is not confronted, disguises itself as personality. You say, that's just how I am, I don't like drama. But what if what you call peace is actually avoidance? What if what you call kindness is actually anxiety? What if what you call humility is actually fear of disapproval? Proverbs chapter 29 verse 25 says, the fear of man brings a snare is a trap. It tightens slowly. You don't even realize you are bound until you try to move. The fear of man does not announce itself loudly. It whispers. It says, don't say that. They might not like it. It says, just agree for now. It says, keep the peace even if it costs you. And before long, you are trapped in a cycle of self-betrayal. Consider the employee who says yes to every assignment. Everyone calls them reliable. Everyone praises their attitude. But inside they are exhausted, overloaded, resentful. They stay late. They sacrifice weekends. They smile in meetings, yet deep down they feel unseen. Why? Because they train people to use them, not respect them. Or think about the friend who never confronts gossip. They laugh along even when it violates their values. They don't want to be the serious one. They don't want to make things awkward. So they stay silent. But every time they silence conviction, they weaken confidence. Psychologically, when you constantly prioritize other people's comfort over your own clarity, you begin to lose your internal compass. You stop asking, what do I believe? And start asking, what will they approve? That shift is subtle, but it is dangerous. Moreover, approval addiction operates like any other addiction. The first compliment feels good. The second feels better. Soon you need it to feel stable. You check reactions, you analyze tone, you replay conversations. You measure your worth by responses. And if someone withdraws, your confidence drops. But here is the uncomfortable truth. If your identity is built on approval, it will collapse under criticism. Respected people understand something that nice people struggle with. Tension is not the enemy. Avoiding necessary tension is the enemy. Growth requires friction. Leadership requires confrontation. Maturity requires difficult conversations. When you say no for the first time, it will feel uncomfortable. When you set a boundary, your voice may shake. When you correct someone, your heart may race. That discomfort does not mean you are wrong. It means you are growing. Meanwhile, the fear of man will always tempt you to shrink. It will say, just let it go. It will say it's not worth the tension. But every time you let something slide that violates your values, you teach people how to treat you. And here is the deeper issue. When you are driven by fear of rejection, you become predictable, manipulable, controllable. People learn that you will bend to maintain connection. They learn that your standards are flexible under pressure. But when you begin to operate from conviction instead of fear, something shifts. You become steady, clear, grounded. You may not be everyone's favorite person, but you become trustworthy. And trust is the foundation of respect. So I need you to examine yourself honestly. Are you kind because you are secure or because you are scared? Do you avoid conflict because you are wise or because you are worried about losing approval? Are you peaceful or are you passive? The fear of man brings a snare, but courage breaks it. And tonight you must decide whether you will continue managing perceptions or start managing your purpose. Let's talk about boundaries, because this is where respect is either built or broken. Most people think boundaries are walls. They think boundaries push people away. But boundaries are not walls. They are lines of clarity. They tell people where you stand, what you value, and what you will not tolerate. Without boundaries, you may be liked, but you will rarely be respected. Galatians chapter 1 verse 10 says, "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I was still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." That scripture is confrontational. It forces you to choose. You cannot serve your calling while being controlled by people's opinions. Let that sink in. If you are constantly adjusting yourself to avoid disappointing others, you are not free. You are managed by reactions. And a person who is managed by reactions cannot lead with authority. Boundaries are the language of self-respect. When you say, "I'm not available for that," you are not being arrogant, you are being aligned. When you say, "That conversation makes me uncomfortable," you are not being dramatic, you are being disciplined. When you say, "I cannot compromise on this," you are not being difficult, you are being decisive. However, the first time you establish boundaries, expect resistance. People who benefited from your lack of limits will feel threatened by your clarity. The friend who used to call you at midnight may accuse you of changing. The colleague who relied on your constant yes may call you uncooperative. The family member who controlled you emotionally may say you are becoming proud. But growth always looks like rebellion to those who preferred your weakness. Respect begins the moment you become consistent with your standards. Not loud, not aggressive, consistent. You don't need to shout to be firm. You don't need to insult to be clear. Calm conviction carries more authority than emotional reactions ever will. And let's be honest, some of you are tired not because life is too demanding, but because you have no boundaries. Your schedule is open to everyone. Your emotions are available to everyone. Your time is negotiable for everyone. And when everything is accessible, nothing is valued. Consider this carefully. When something is rare, it is respected. When something is always available, it is often taken for granted. If your yes costs nothing, it means nothing. But when your yes is intentional, it carries weight. Furthermore, boundaries protect focus. You cannot pursue purpose if you are constantly responding to every request, every invitation, every expectation. Discipline requires elimination, and elimination requires courage. Ask yourself, where do I need a boundary? Is it in my time? Is it in my relationships? Is it in my communication? Is it in my work? Where have I been saying yes out of fear instead of conviction? The moment you begin to honor your own limits, you teach others to honor them too. And even if some people step back, the ones who remain will relate to you differently. They will see clarity. They will sense stability. They will recognize strength. Because here is the truth, boundaries do not destroy healthy relationships. They expose unhealthy ones. And if you truly want to be respected, you must become comfortable disappointing people when necessary. Not out of pride, not out of ego, but out of obedience to purpose. So tonight, will you continue being endlessly accessible just to be liked? Or will you become disciplined, defined, and deliberate so you can be respected? Now let me prepare you for something most people never talk about: the loneliness that sometimes comes with respect. The moment you stop laughing at what is wrong, the moment you stop tolerating what drains you, the moment you stop shrinking to make others comfortable, you will notice a shift. The room feels different. The invitations reduce. The conversations change. And you will be tempted to think you did something wrong. But sometimes isolation is not punishment. It is promotion. Look at the life of Joseph. In Genesis chapter 37, verse 23 to 28, his own brothers stripped him of his coat and sold him. Why? Because he carried vision. Because he refused to think small. Because favor was on his life. The same people who ate with him could not handle the weight of his destiny. Respect often separates before it elevates. And consider Apostle Paul. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 16 to 17, he says, "At my first defense, no one came to stand by me, but all deserted me. But the Lord stood by me and strengthened me." Did you hear that? No one stood with him. This was not weakness, this was the cost of conviction. There are seasons where standing firm will make you stand alone. Meanwhile, many people stay small to stay surrounded. They dilute their standards to maintain company. They laugh at things they've outgrown. They participate in conversations that violate their values. Why? Because they fear being left out. But being left out of what no longer aligns is not loss, it is protection. When you begin to grow in discipline, you will outgrow certain environments. When you become focused, distractions will feel uncomfortable around you. When you start setting standards, those who prefer chaos will slowly distance themselves. And that distance can feel painful. You will question yourself, am I too serious? Am I becoming too rigid? Why does this feel so isolating? But growth is often quiet before it is celebrated. Maturity is often lonely before it is recognized. Respect is different from popularity. Popularity gathers crowds quickly. Respect builds influence slowly. Popularity fills rooms. Respect shapes rooms. Popularity depends on mood. Respect depends on character. Moreover, when you walk in conviction, you threaten mediocrity. Your discipline exposes laziness. Your clarity exposes confusion. Your boundaries expose manipulation. And not everyone will appreciate that exposure. But here is the powerful truth. You do not need everyone. You need alignment. Joseph's separation positioned him for the palace. Paul's isolation deepened his dependence on God. And in your life, the space created by losing certain people may be the very space God needs to elevate you. The danger is running back to comfort too soon. The danger is apologizing for growth. The danger is lowering your standards just to feel included again. So let me ask you honestly, are you willing to be misunderstood for a season if it means being established for a lifetime? Are you willing to endure temporary loneliness for permanent authority? Are you willing to let go of shallow approval to gain deep respect? Because respected people are not always surrounded, but they are always grounded. And when you are grounded in purpose, even if the crowd thins, your confidence strengthens. Let's shift the focus to something practical. Because respect is not built on attitude alone, it is built on competence. You can speak boldly, you can set boundaries, you can declare standards. But if your life lacks discipline and excellence, people may hear your words but ignore your leadership. Respect is sustained by results. Look at Daniel. Daniel chapter 6 verse 3 says that Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. Notice that word distinguished. He stood out, not because he was loud, not because he demanded recognition, but because his work ethic, integrity, and consistency separated him. Excellence commands respect without begging for it. Daniel served in a foreign system. He was surrounded by political tension, jealousy, and opposition, yet he maintained discipline. He prayed consistently. He worked diligently. He refused corruption, and even those who plotted against him could not deny his competence. Now bring that into your life. If you want to be respected in your field, are you developing your skills? If you want authority in your family, are you consistent in your character? If you want influence in your community, are you dependable when it matters? Many people demand respect, but they neglect preparation. They want recognition without refinement. They want authority without accountability. But respect is earned in private before it is acknowledged in public. Furthermore, discipline builds confidence. When you know you have done the work, you speak differently. When you know you are prepared, you stand differently. When you know your integrity is intact, criticism does not destabilize you as easily. This is why competence is powerful. It removes insecurity. It reduces the need for validation. It strengthens your voice. Because deep down you know you are not pretending. Contrast that with the person who wants to be liked more than prepared. They focus on image over improvement. They invest in impressions over impact. They spend energy being agreeable instead of being exceptional. And here is the reality. Charisma may open doors, but consistency keeps them open. Talent may attract attention, but discipline earns trust. If you are late all the time but very friendly, people may like you, but they will not rely on you. If you speak confidently but fail to deliver, people may applaud you once, but they will hesitate the next time. Respect grows where reliability lives. Moreover, excellence silences unnecessary arguments. When your results are strong, you do not need to defend yourself constantly. When your work speaks, your critics lose volume. So I challenge you tonight, stop focusing only on being bold in personality. Be strong in preparation. Be serious about growth. Sharpen your skills. Strengthen your habits. Protect your integrity. Because when excellence meets conviction, respect becomes inevitable. Now ask yourself, in what area of my life do I need to increase competence? Where have I been demanding recognition without developing capacity? Where have I been chasing visibility instead of mastery? The path to respect is paved with discipline. Now let's confront something that quietly weakens authority: the need to explain yourself to everyone. The moment you begin to grow, improve, or set boundaries, questions will come. Why are you acting different? Who do you think you are? Why can't you just relax? And if you are not careful, you will spend precious energy defending decisions that were never meant to be negotiated. Consider Nehemiah. In Nehemiah chapter 6 verse 3, when his enemies tried to distract him from rebuilding the wall, he responded, "I am doing a great work and I cannot come down." That statement is powerful. He did not over-explain, he did not argue, he did not hold a debate to justify his focus. He simply stated his priority and stayed committed. That is authority. When you know your assignment, you do not feel obligated to attend every argument. When you are clear about your direction, you do not respond to every rumor. When you are disciplined, you do not abandon purpose to defend ego. However, many people lose respect because they talk too much. They over-justify, they over-defend, they overshare, they seek understanding from individuals who are committed to misunderstanding them. And here is the truth: not every accusation deserves a response, not every opinion requires your energy, not every critic deserves access to your explanation. When you are constantly explaining yourself, you subtly communicate insecurity. But when you are calm, focused, and consistent, you communicate confidence. This does not mean you become silent and secretive. It means you become selective. Selective with your words, selective with your energy. Selective with your time. Think about it. The moment you decide to wake up earlier, someone will say you are doing too much. The moment you stop attending certain events, someone will say you are isolating yourself. The moment you stop tolerating disrespect, someone will say you have changed. Yes, you have changed. That is the point. Growth always looks strange to those who are comfortable. Discipline always looks extreme to those who are casual. Focus always looks rigid to those who are distracted. But you cannot rebuild your life and manage everyone's perception at the same time. Nehemiah understood that distraction is often disguised as invitation. Come down and talk. Let's meet and discuss. But he saw the trap. If he left the wall, progress would pause. If he engaged every critic, the work would suffer. And in your life, every time you step away from purpose to satisfy someone's curiosity or calm someone's insecurity, you delay your own advancement. So let me ask you something serious. How much time have you wasted explaining decisions that were already clear in your spirit? How many opportunities have you postponed because you felt the need to convince everyone first? How much energy have you drained trying to be understood by people who are not aligned with your assignment? Respect grows when you move with clarity. You can be kind and still be firm. You can be loving and still be focused. You can be respectful and still refuse to come down from your wall. The statement, "I am doing a great work and I cannot come down," must become a mindset, a filter, a standard. If it distracts from the work, you cannot come down. If it weakens your discipline, you cannot come down. If it compromises your integrity, you cannot come down. Authority is not loud, it is steady. Now let's redefine something that many people misunderstand: love. Because some of you have been nice in the name of love. You tolerate disrespect and call it patience. You avoid correction and call it kindness. You allow patterns to continue and call it understanding. But real love is not passive. Revelation chapter 3 verse 19 says, "Those whom I love, I rebuke and discipline. So be zealous and repent." That is powerful. The Bible connects love with rebuke, love with discipline, love with correction. That means if there is no correction, there may not be real care. We live in a generation that equates love with comfort. If you love me, accept everything. If you love me, never confront me. If you love me, let me do what I want. But that is not biblical love. That is emotional convenience. God corrects because He cares. A parent corrects because they care. A true friend confronts because they care. If someone watches you destroy your potential and says nothing, that is not kindness, that is neglect. However, when you decide to operate in tough love, you will be misunderstood. The moment you confront someone's behavior, they may call you harsh. The moment you refuse to support their excuses, they may call you unsupportive. The moment you challenge their complacency, they may say you are judgmental. But ask yourself this: would you rather be temporarily misunderstood or permanently ineffective? Love sees potential and refuses to let it rot. Love sees danger and refuses to stay silent. Love values destiny over temporary comfort. And here is the deeper truth: you must apply that same tough love to yourself. You cannot demand discipline from others while excusing laziness in your own life. You cannot confront mediocrity in others while entertaining it in your own habits. You cannot preach standards and live carelessly. Sometimes the reason you are stuck is because you have been too nice to yourself. You negotiate with your goals, you delay your responsibilities, you justify your inconsistency, and then you wonder why progress is slow. Love yourself enough to correct yourself. Discipline is not punishment, it is protection. Correction is not rejection, it is redirection. When God rebukes, He refines. When He disciplines, He develops. Furthermore, people respect those who are consistent in correction. If you always laugh things off, people will test your limits. If you never address issues, people will assume there are no consequences. But when you are clear, calm, and corrective when necessary, people learn where you stand. This does not mean you become aggressive. It means you become intentional. You speak truth without cruelty. You address issues without humiliation. You correct privately when possible. You stand firm when required. Because at the end of the day, nice avoids discomfort. Love embraces responsibility, and responsibility builds respect. So tonight, are you willing to stop confusing silence with love? Are you willing to correct when necessary? Are you willing to discipline yourself so that your life reflects your convictions? Because if you truly want to be respected, you must be courageous enough to love deeply, even when it is uncomfortable. Now we come to a truth many avoid: the cost of being respected. Respect is not free. It is not a byproduct of popularity or charm. It carries a price. And the cost often shows up as misunderstanding, temporary loneliness, and resistance. Matthew chapter 5 verse 11 to 12 reminds us, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven." Notice this: when you stand for truth, when you maintain integrity, when you refuse to compromise, you will face resistance. People may misunderstand your motives. They may accuse you of pride, harshness, or arrogance. They may even turn against you. And yet the blessing comes in staying aligned with purpose. Some of you have already experienced this. Perhaps you set a boundary and a friend withdrew. Perhaps you pursued a goal that others didn't understand. Perhaps you refused to participate in gossip or unethical behavior, and suddenly you felt isolated. That is the cost of being respected. The world often prefers the agreeable, the compliant, the nice. But here's the lesson: some people only benefit from your weakness. They are comfortable when you shrink. They are reassured when you avoid conflict. They feel safe when you are submissive. And if you continue to bend to keep everyone comfortable, you will never experience the fullness of your purpose. Being respected requires courage. Courage to disappoint. Courage to stand firm even when people leave. Courage to uphold standards even when it feels lonely. Courage to choose principle over popularity. This is why many never reach their full potential. They avoid confrontation. They chase approval. They water down their convictions to remain liked. And while they may have crowds around them, they lack authority, influence, and legacy. But the truth is, the cost is worth it. Because temporary misunderstanding leads to permanent alignment. Temporary loneliness leads to enduring respect. Temporary resistance leads to lasting authority. So tonight, make a declaration in your heart. I will not trade destiny for approval. I will not shrink my standards for comfort. I will not compromise my integrity for applause. I will choose purpose over popularity, principle over people